Picture this: a cold river, a narrow wooden bridge, and a man who has already decided he's not going to move. He's wet to the knee, gripping a long axe, watching a road shimmer in late September light. He can hear feet in the distance, not a few travellers, a lot. The sound of a country arriving angry. Somewhere behind him, the Viking camp is half a day's confidence deep, men scattered, helmets off, mail shirts folded thinking the hard part is over. Then the English line appears, not cautious, not slow, moving like a blade that already knows where it's going to cut. This isn't a movie. If you're on the wrong side of that bridge, you don't get a heroic beat, you get seconds. This is the story of how the Vikings didn't lose because they were weak. They lost because they believed the fight was finished. Stamford Bridge, 1066, is often sold like a neat ending. The last great Viking battle, the last time the North tried to take England the old way. That's too clean. It was a collision between two hard men who both thought speed and nerve could replace luck, and for one of them, it worked for a single day, and then it destroyed him 2 weeks later. If you like this kind of history, the kind where victory tastes like iron and the bill shows up fast, tap like, subscribe, and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. To understand why one day could wipe out an army, you have to start with the pressure cooker. England is a throne with no quiet moment left. King Edward the Confessor is dead, and with him goes the thin thread holding rival claims in check. Harold Godwinson takes the crown, and the moment he does, he inherits 3 problems at once. One is a powerful duke across the Channel, William of Normandy, who believes the crown was promised to him, and who has the ships, the money and the patience to turn that belief into an invasion. Another is in the north, where old ties, old grudges and old bargains make loyalty a moving target. The third comes from the sea lanes, and the long memory of Scandinavian kings who do not see England as a foreign prize, they see it as unfinished business. Here's the first correction moment, because pop culture loves to flatten Vikings into a single mood, screaming raiders, horned helmets, mad eyes, pure chaos. By 1066, the Viking world is not just raiding. It's kingship, it's taxation, it's alliances, it's law, it's ambition dressed in legitimacy. The man sailing toward England in 1066 is not some anonymous sea-wolf looking for silver. He is Harald Hardrada, a king of Norway, and he is playing for everything, not a quick hit. Even his nickname Hardrada carries that sense of hardness, of rule by force and will. He has fought across the map of the medieval world, and the sources that talk about his life make him sound like a man who never learned how to be small. When he comes for England, he comes like a claimant, not a tourist. And he doesn't come alone. He has an English partner in the north, Tostig Godwinson, Harold's own brother, a man whose story is basically a warning label about pride. Tostig had been Earl of Northumbria, driven out by a revolt, and he did not accept the idea that a crowd could strip him of status. He wants his place back, and if his brother won't hand it to him, he will bring an army to take it. That mix is combustible, Hardrada's vast ambition and Tostig's personal grievance. One wants a crown, the other wants revenge, and both are willing to burn England to get it. Now place them on the map. The north of England is not a soft target, but it is far from Harold's seat of power. If you can land there, you can force a decision before the king can gather the whole realm. That's the strategy. Hardrada sails in with a large host, and the details of numbers are debated, as they often are, but we don't need a clean figure to understand the scale. It's enough to say this was a serious invasion force, not a raid. He lands, moves inland, and quickly pulls the north into panic mode. Local leaders have to respond because if they don't, the story ends before it begins. That response becomes the Battle of Fulford, fought just outside York on the 20th of September 1066. The English earls in the north, Edwin and Morcar, bring an army to stop the Norwegians and their allies. They pick ground near the River Ouse, marshy in places, tight in others. You can feel the logic, use terrain to blunt an enemy that thrives on shock. But Fulford goes wrong. The Vikings win, and it's not a symbolic win. It's the kind that rips open the region's defences. The north bleeds, and York is exposed. This matters because it changes the mood in the Viking camp. After Fulford, confidence rises for a reason. They just beat the main local opposition. York, the great northern city, is within reach, and with it come supplies, hostages, and legitimacy. The Vikings can demand terms. They do. The The sources describe negotiations and the exchange of hostages, and what's important is the psychological shift. An army that has just won and is now receiving hostages starts to believe the campaign is entering its controlled phase. Not safe, never safe, but managed. That belief is the seed of Stamford Bridge. Harold Godwinson, meanwhile, is in the south, watching the sea and waiting for Normandy. He has spent weeks holding a defensive posture, keeping forces ready, trying to guess where William will land, trying to keep the country from tiring out before the main blow falls. Then he gets news from the north. Hardrada has landed. Fulford is lost. York is threatened. And Harold makes one of the most brutal strategic choices a king can make. He decides to move faster than news, faster than fear, faster than the enemy expects a medieval army to move. Harold's march north is speed as strategy. It's one of those moments where logistics become drama. You don't just march an army like moving pieces on a board. You move men who need food, water, rest, and whose feet split open. You move horses that need grain. You move through a country that has to support you without collapsing. Harold goes anyway. The distance from London to York is roughly 185 miles, about 300 kilometres, and doing it fast means strain, and strain means mistakes, and mistakes mean death later. But Harold wants one thing: surprise. If Hardrada thinks he has time, Harold dies. If Hardrada believes the fight is finished, Harold can hit him while he's exhaling. Imagine being a man in Harold's column. You're told the king is taking you north, not gradually, not in stages, but now. You've already been on edge, scanning the southern coast for sails, and now you're running toward a different invasion like the country is on fire in two places at once. You don't know if William is landing behind you. You don't know if your farm is safe. You just know the king is moving like a man who understands he can't afford a second delay. That's the emotional texture of this march, a forced sprint with a knife at your back. Harold reaches York fast enough that it shocks the story. The exact pace is debated, because medieval sources love drama and love compressing time, but the consensus is clear: it was an unusually rapid march for a force of that size, and it works. Hardrada and Tostig do not expect the King of England to appear in force so soon. Their focus is on York, hostages and terms. Their men are split between the main camp and the area around Stamford Bridge, where the exchange is supposed to happen. Here is where the famous mistake enters, and we have to handle it carefully. Some sources emphasise that many of Hardrada's men were without armour at the moment of contact, because they expected a meeting, not a battle, and because some equipment was left behind at the ships. We cannot treat that as a camera-ready certainty for every man on the field. What we can say is this: the Vikings were not in full battle posture, and multiple accounts suggest a level of relaxation that became fatal when Harold arrived. That's enough. You don't need everyone shirtless to understand the core problem. If your line is scattered, if your leaders are not expecting a sudden strike, you lose the first minutes, and the first minutes decide the rest. On the 25th of September 1066, Harold comes out towards Stamford Bridge with intent. The scene is almost cruel in its simplicity. The Vikings are near a river, the Derwent, with a bridge that controls movement. There are open fields and low rises. There is water that can trap you. There is a road that funnels you. It's not a maze, it's a choke point. If you are surprised in a place like that, you either snap into order instantly, or you drown in your own confusion. The traditional image is that Harold tries words first, offering terms, offering Tostig a return of his earldom if he will switch sides. The sources differ in detail, and we shouldn't pretend we can hear the exact offers. What matters is that a final chance was there, a last moment where pride and ambition could have chosen a different exit. Tostig doesn't take it. Hardrada doesn't take it. And the battle becomes inevitable, not because nobody understood the stakes, but because they did, and they still chose the edge. Then the trap closes. Harold's army hits the Viking force near the bridge, and the impact is chaos. This is not a gentle push of shields in a straight line. It's a rush, a collision, men trying to form ranks while others are still arriving, runners shouting orders, the sound of iron on wood, wood on bone, horses screaming, and the river beside it all, waiting for the first man to slip. The Vikings try to hold the crossing, because if the English cross in strength, the smaller Viking force near the bridge is finished. The English try to force it, because if the Vikings can retreat across the river and form a line on the far side, Surprise loses its sharpest advantage. This is where the bridge stand enters, and this is the second correction moment. You've probably heard the story of a single Viking holding the bridge alone, cutting down dozens, buying time for his comrades. It's a legendary detail, repeated as tradition, and it fits the kind of story medieval writers love. One man as a symbol, a human gate, a heroic delay. Could a determined fighter hold a narrow bridge for a time? Yes, it's plausible. Do we know the exact shape of it? The exact number of men he killed? The exact way he fell? No. Those numbers belong to story. So treat it like this, as a tradition that captures the feeling of that moment, the desperate need for time, and the brutal fact that terrain can turn one fighter into a temporary wall. Picture the bridge anyway, because even if the details blur, the physics does not. A narrow crossing means only so many men can come at once. A long axe is a terrifying tool in that space. Reach, weight, and a single swing that can break a shield arm. The English are trying to push a crowd across a bottleneck, while being hit in the face by a man who has nowhere to retreat and no reason to care about tomorrow. The river runs under the boards, cold and fast enough to punish anyone who falls. Men hesitate because hesitation is survival, and every hesitation costs time. That is the choke point chaos. That is why this battle becomes famous. Not because it is clean, but because it is cruelly shaped by geography. While that struggle happens at the bridge, the Vikings farther back are doing something harder than fighting. They're trying to become an army again. Imagine being a man near the Viking camp at Recall, hearing that the English king is here, right now, not next week, not tomorrow, now. You scramble for your mail shirt, you try to buckle straps with hands that are already shaking, you run toward the sound, and all the while you're thinking the same thought. We just won at Fulford, we took York, this is not supposed to be happening. The campaign was moving into negotiation, and suddenly it is moving into survival. Hardrada reacts with speed, but reaction is not the same as readiness. He needs to bring up men from the ships, he needs to tighten the line, he needs to stop the English from turning the crossing into a slaughterhouse. You can feel the stress on command here. Leaders are not magic, they are men trying to turn panic into shape using voice and reputation. And if you arrive late to a fight, your first job is not winning, it's preventing collapse. The battle expands beyond the bridge as more Vikings arrive and the English force manages to get across in strength. The fighting becomes a series of savage pushes and partial withdrawals, men forming up, breaking, reforming. Shields lock, spears jab, axes bite, and the ground under it all starts to turn into churned grass and blood-slick mud, because enough bodies on a field changes the field. That's not poetry, that's mechanics. Feet slip, horses stumble, a man goes down, and if the line is tight, he doesn't get up. Hardrada, for all his experience, is now in the worst possible position for a commander who believes in force of will. He's being forced into a battle on someone else's timetable. Harold chose the day, chose the moment, chose the shock. Hardrada is reacting inside a narrowing space. That doesn't make him foolish, it makes him human. You can be a great warrior and still lose to timing. You can be a great king and still have your army caught between a river and an enemy who refuses to be late. There is also exhaustion, and it belongs to everyone. The Vikings have been campaigning, fighting Fulford, taking terms, moving men. The English have sprint marched from the south, burning themselves to arrive in time. So this battle is not fresh troops testing each other in a tournament mood. It is tired bodies forced to maximum output. That's why it becomes so lethal. Fatigue makes mistakes faster. Fatigue turns a small stumble into a death. Fatigue makes courage shorter, because courage is also a fuel. At some point in that maelstrom, Hardrada is killed. The sources describe him struck down, and the specific details vary. We should not invent the exact blow. What matters is the effect. When a king dies in the middle of a battle, it's not just sadness, it's structural damage. Command depends on the leader's presence, especially in an army built around personal loyalty and reputation. Hardrada's fall is a leadership collapse. Men who are fighting to win now fight to survive. Men who are holding because the king is there now look over their shoulder and see absence. And absence spreads. Tostig keeps fighting. Think about the bitterness of that. Tostig has pushed himself into a corner where retreat is not just tactical, it's personal humiliation. If he lives by switching sides, he still loses, because he becomes the man who betrayed his new ally and still didn't get his throne. If he flees, he is the brother who rose against Harold and ran, so he stays. The sources report him killed as well. Again, the exact moment is not for us to claim, but the arc is clear. The coalition loses both of its key leaders in the same battle, and once that happens, you are not watching a contest anymore. You are watching a rout trying to pretend it isn't. This is where the day becomes a wipeout. The Vikings do not simply lose, they break, and breaking near a river is a special kind of horror. Your retreat path narrows, your wounded slow the line, your fastest men get away and your slowest die first. The bridge that was your defence becomes your bottleneck. The Derwent becomes both obstacle and grave. Men try to cross under pressure. Some make it, some don't, some are pushed, some slip. And the English, fueled by the shock of their own speed and by the anger of being invaded, press the advantage hard, because this is how you end an invasion before it can recover. Imagine being a Viking who fought all morning and now realizes the battle is not turning back. You look for banners, for familiar faces, for orders, and you find only noise. You run because the man next to you runs. You step over bodies because stopping means joining them. You reach the bridge and see the crush, and you understand in one cold second what choke point chaos really is. You're not retreating across a bridge, you're trying to squeeze your life through a narrow piece of wood, while another army is trying to turn that wood into a killing floor. Some Vikings do reach the ships at recall. That becomes the last anchor, the thing that still makes sense. Ships mean escape. Ships mean the sea, and the sea is the one place England cannot trap them easily. But even there, the story is brutal. The sources say only a fraction of the fleet was needed to carry survivors home, and one famous tradition claims that a huge armada left, and only a couple dozen ships returned. The exact numbers are debated, and medieval chroniclers love dramatic contrasts, but the point stands even without a clean count. The loss was catastrophic. An invasion army that came for a crown is reduced to a wounded remnant trying to get back across the North Sea alive. Now, let the moral hangover land. Harold has won one of the most decisive defensive battles in English history, and he has done it with speed, surprise, and aggression. But it's not a clean triumph. A battlefield like Stamford Bridge leaves behind bodies that were human beings with families and hopes and oaths, and now they are objects in the grass. It leaves behind the ugly work after battle, the stripping of gear, the taking of what can be taken, the sorting of prisoners if any are taken, the hard choices about mercy that are always easier to talk about in sermons than in blood-wet boots. The sources do not give us a full inventory of every act after the fighting, and we should not paint confident scenes where the record is thin. Still, medieval war rarely ends politely. Even victory has a smell, and it is not perfume. Harold's victory also comes with a cruel twist that makes 1066 feel like a machine designed to grind men down. Because he does not get to celebrate. He does not get to rest. He does not get to consolidate the North and turn this into a stable political win. William of Normandy is still there, still waiting, still building an invasion. And the very thing that made Harold so dangerous at Stamford Bridge, his speed, now becomes a trap. He has marched a long way north with an army that has bled and tired itself out, and now he has to turn around and march south again, because the real storm is about to land. Picture the concrete objects that tie this together. The bridge boards, slick and worn. The helmets slit, narrowing a man's world into a strip of panic. The orders shouted until voices crack. The oars of the surviving ships biting into water as the remnant flees. And the king, Harold, forced back onto the road like the road owns him. History remembers Stamford Bridge as the end of Viking England dreams, and in a sense, it is. This is the last time a Scandinavian king comes with a great host and almost takes the English crown by force. The Vikings didn't fade gently, they slammed into a wall. But here's the darker irony. Stamford Bridge is also the moment Harold spends a huge portion of England's strength to beat one invader, right before he has to face another. He wins hard in the north, and then he is dragged into Hastings in the south on the 14th of October 1066, and the country is forced to pay twice in the same season. Harold's sprint north is brilliant, and it is costly. His victory is real, and it leaves him tired. It shows how deadly he can be, and it shows how thin his margin is. In a year like 1066, your best move can still be the move that empties your lungs before the final punch arrives. So what is Stamford Bridge really about? It's not Vikings being weak. It's Vikings being human. It's the moment confidence becomes carelessness, the moment a campaign shifts from battle to bargaining, and the enemy refuses to wait for you to finish your sentence. It's also a reminder that great warriors are not invincible when time turns against them. Hardrada comes as a king playing for everything. He wins at Fulford. He takes York's terms. He stands on the edge of success, and then surprise hits him like a hammer. He dies in a fight he did not choose on a day he did not plan, and his army collapses because armies are not just numbers, they are cohesion, leadership, and belief. And Harold proves something terrifying at Stamford Bridge. He proves he can move like a predator. He proves he can turn speed into a weapon. He proves he can punish arrogance with a blade. But he also proves something else without meaning to. He proves that England can win a massive battle and still be forced into another one before the bruises fade. That's the true brutality of 1066. Not just the blood, but the schedule. The calendar becomes a noose. When people talk about the end of the Vikings, they often picture a slow decline, a fading culture, a gentle merging into medieval Europe. Stamford Bridge is not gentle, it is a slammed door. A king dies, an invasion shatters, survivors crawl back to the sea. And the victor, the man who did the smashing, cannot even stand still and watch the dust settle, because another set of sails is already on its way. Next, we follow that road south, and we watch what happens when a tired winner meets a patient invader, and the whole country runs out of breath.